I've always been really, really interested in kind of the world, people, how things work. And I think looking back, I was kind of preparing for today, actually thinking about my role and kind of what I've done. It always transcends back to kind of an understanding of people, the world, and how it kind of all works.
Welcome to the Property Funder podcast. I'm Michael Dean, I'm your host. Today we've got Clare Grimes with us in the studio. Clare is at GRE Finance, and Clare joined GRE Finance in November 2023 to head up Origination for the firm. Prior to joining GRE Finance, Clare was at leading UK specialist real estate investor, Octopus Real Estate, where she specialised in the origination and transaction execution of real estate debt transactions. Clare has gained extensive knowledge and experience through working with a range of clients across a variety of real estate sectors. Clare is a chartered surveyor, having qualified in February 2022, and holds a master's degree in real estate investment and finance from Henley Business School. Clare won Young Property Person of the Year at the prestigious Props Awards in 2024. That for me is something that I'm very attached to and proud of, as I've been a member of the advisory board of Variety, the children's charity for which the Props raises money, and a senior committee member for the last 10 years. So anyway, without further ado, welcome, Clare.
Thank you for having me.
So I didn't realise you were a chartered surveyor as well. Are you still got your letters?
Still got the letters.
So where did you qualify as a chartered surveyor?
So I did that at Octopus.
At Octopus, I didn't know you. I didn't realise you could do that there.
Yeah. So at the time, I did it kind of alongside my role and alongside studying for the master's degree. But now they've got a more formal kind of training program which allows you to do it. But
that's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm not going to bore you with my thoughts on the RSES, so we can move swiftly on. They'd have expelled me by now if I hadn't quit. So no, that's all good. You've had quite a meteoric rise in the real estate industry. You know, you're obviously very young. You've won a highly coveted Young Property Personality Award at the Props, which is very highly respected. Tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are. You know, obviously having ascended to head of origination at a well-respected debt business now. Despite being really young, you beat off a lot of competition for this Young Property Personality Award at the Props. With the likes of Nick Christophe, for fellow podcast alumni in there as well. How did talk us through the journey? How did you get to where you are? Because from what I understand, it's pretty inspiring.
So if I take it back to kind of being at university, I went originally to Loughborough to study sociology. The reason for that was I've always been really, really interested in kind of the world, people, how things work. And I think looking back, I was kind of preparing for today, actually thinking about my role and kind of what I've done. It always transcends back to kind of an understanding of people, the world, and how it kind of all works. So I studied sociology at Loughborough. In between kind of my second and third year, I did an internship at Lloyd's, and I really enjoyed working on the real estate-led projects at Lloyd's Bank when I was there for kind of 10 weeks over the summer between my second and third year. I then joined Octopus, and I joined in a very junior role when I first joined. My role was to basically take in the loan application forms, process them, and then kind of get them moving, get people their funds. And then I quickly moved into what was the commercial team there. So in that team, we focused on lending on things like hotels, offices, industrial units, sites. And I was there for basically the whole time when I was at Octopus. And I really kind of learnt my craft there. So I learnt how to kind of get a deal from the very beginning, from the inquiry, the person calling you up with what they need, all the way to kind of the funds out the door, and also managing that loan and kind of managing it from a portfolio management perspective. I also gained experience on kind of fundraising, how you manage a fund, raise a fund, how you deal with all types of kind of stakeholder relationships. And then, in November 23, I moved over to GRE, and it's a great business, and we're kind of doing great things. And that's kind of the journey. The one thing I did miss out is that during that time at Octopus, I became a chartered surveyor, did my masters, and I started managing people when I was at Octopus, and all those things. I had a real variety of experience up until moving, and actually that gave me a real great foundation in the industry. And just the one thing I would say to people is the one thing I think is super useful and super interesting to learn, just learn how to get a deal done. How do you actually get a deal over the line? And I think that's super important for people coming up through the industry, not to be siloed.
I'm going to ask you a little bit about GRE Finance in a minute, and obviously you're one of your colleagues, Michael Mirrorman, I've known for a long time and have a lot of respect for, and we've done business together in previous life. But, the story you're telling, probably very, very modestly sounds like one of, just a sort of meteoric rise to a really great position of authority in the specialist finance world. What were the, can you give some examples of some of the adversity that you encountered in that journey? Because, it's not going to have been smooth sailing the whole way, right?
So some of the adversity, I think, is around just the kind of the hard yards, the hours spent in the office, the hours, there was a period where I was doing a job, I was doing my master's, I was trying to become a chartered surveyor, and actually doing those three things amongst kind of having a life and having a social life and kind of being a good friend, sister, daughter, and all those things, that comes with its own adversity, just managing all of those things and spinning all of those plates. I think there's also been times in my career where people probably haven't backed me and haven't kind of believed in me, and I've always had to believe in myself. So there's kind of two areas of adversity, I think. When
you talk about someone not backing you, not believing you, what does that look like? Like, can you give an example of where that of when that happened?
I think obviously owing to my age, I think there's been times where people just haven't thought that I was probably good enough to be involved in the things I was being involved with, or wasn't deserving of a promotion or a pay rise or whatever it was. And often it came back to my age, and often it came back to kind of years of service. And I think that's not necessarily the right approach to take with people, when you're running organizations. But actually, that was. I never let it stop me. I just kept trying, kept pushing, relentless in kind of like driving forwards in what I was doing.
As someone who, runs a business, a similar business to Octopus and GRE, from a learning perspective, how do you think that would have been better dealt with? Like, how do you think that Octopus might have looked after you better in that situation, which is not necessarily speak down to Octopus, but it's quite common for businesses to reward people based on time served rather than what they've achieved and the direction that they're going in. Could you maybe give me some advice as to how might I, if I was faced with someone like you in your position, how might I reward them better, in that circumstance?
I think the problem comes, and I think this covers a lot of larger businesses or businesses that are going through a transition where they're going from small, medium to large, is that it can, it gets the kind of performance reviews, it gets the bonus time, pay rise time, and it's really difficult to manage that as a process. You have to kind of structure it in a way where there's quantifiable markers and frameworks. But I think it's really important to get under the skin. As a business owner, as a leader, you need to get under the skin of what people are actually doing day to day. And I think one of the other things that I've learned actually over the years, and someone once said to me in a meeting, never ask the most senior person to talk first. And what that means is often people will follow the views or of the most senior person. So they'll speak first, they'll say something, and generally everyone else then aligns themselves and aligns their thoughts to that person. Actually, I think you need to make sure that you're speaking to the most junior people, understanding what is going on the ground with people. But I appreciate in a much larger organization when you need to try and find some way of paying people fairly and rewarding people fairly, it can be super difficult. But I think it's really just making sure that however you're monitoring people, it's not just quantitative, there's a qualitative nature, and that you're getting verbal feedback from people. You're getting that's what I would say.
Do you think your personality was always more naturally suited to being in a smaller, more entrepreneurial organisation rather than, I guess, the sort of the behemoth that Octopus has become? I mean, we have a huge amount of respect for Octopus, so much so that two of our C-suite are former Octopus employees. So certainly not speaking ill of them, but Octopus Property as an organisation is a rounding error compared to the rest of the Octopus group. You're very much cogs in the machine. Do you think that that sort of setup, that sort of working environment just wasn't naturally suited to a personality like yours, which obviously seems quite driven and determined.
Yeah, I think it provides an excellent foundation, an organisation like that. And I am so glad that I started my career in a much larger organisation. But I think 100% I'm much more suited to a smaller organisation where I can make a much bigger impact. But I do think it's often career dependent and where you are in your career.
Yeah.
And actually, I think there's a lot to be said for starting out within the industry and having an amazing organisation where you can kind of just see everything and see loads of scenarios and work with loads of different types of people and then find out what it is you want to do. But I think 100% I'm much more suited to an entrepreneurial, more creative organisation such as GRE Finance.
Well, I mean, I certainly can speak to that as well. As someone who, many moons ago, sort of back in ancient history, worked at a big firm. I trained at Cushman & Wakefield. I did my APC at Cushman & Wakefield. It took me 2 goes. So, it took me 2 goes at my driving test as well. So there you go. Go figure, have to do everything twice. I think that there's a lot to be said for starting out in a big organisation. You get a good foundation. I built a really good network of my fellow grads, my grad intake at Cushman's, and then subsequently have done transactions with them. We both talked about, you were at Henley Business School. I mean, I was kind of as well. Reading University Real Estate Foundation or Real Estate course is part of the same Henley network. And it's the network that you get as well from that, which is so valuable in my experience. So I think there's a lot to be said for starting your career in a big organisation. But I worked out really quickly that me and working in a big organisation were never going to be a good natural fit. So it's definitely interesting to see the journey that you're on as well.
Yeah.
So why GRE Finance? Why the move? What was the thing that really sparked that? How did it come about?
So I think when you're working in any organisation, you really have to buy into the people that are leading the organisation. So Daniel and Michael are, they're incredible business people. They know real estate, they know property, they understand lending really, really well. So I pretty much bought into those two. And GRE Finance as a business, we kind of cover all sectors. We're very real estate led, which I think is really important for me. So I feel like I have not a passion, that sounds a bit of a cliche, but I find buildings interesting. I find building projects interesting. And we're very much real estate led. We focus on value add opportunities, kind of planning led type deals. And we focus on things that are a bit different and a bit, quirkier in the market. And actually, I think that's something that really pulled me. So the two of them and the type of stuff that we look to do. Yeah.
So again, because I'm not super familiar with GRE's product set, and certainly not always coming up or not seeing GRE terms sort of in competition with Avonmore's terms. Can you kind of give us an idea as to what, if a broker has a deal on their desk, when should they be picking up the phone to you at GRE to talk about what you can offer them?
Yeah, so how we kind of categorize the type of deals we do is they are focusing on transitional assets or value add opportunities. So typically the types of deals we do, so I mentioned we cover all sectors. So that is anything from kind of existing housing stock all the way through to offices, hotels, petrol stations, all of those kind of nuanced assets. And really the loans that we go into, when we go into them, there is always a kind of uplift in value throughout the loan term. And that may be by way of planning gain, a change of use, leasing up a multi-let office, or things like that. In terms of, so they're the types of deals we do, and we try to look at things with a real commercial approach. So if there's something that might be quirky or nuanced, you kind of come to us and we'd be able to look at it with kind of a different lens to other people in the market. Types of deals we've done recently, we completed a open storage site on Park Royal. So we'll do things that maybe other lenders aren't necessarily familiar with the sector, or they're not comfortable with the sector yet. We can kind of get comfortable with a variety of sectors, but generally the theme is always that there's a value uplift during our loan term.
I mean, and ticket size wise, what sort of what sort of sizes of loans? What do you not get out of bed for less than
2 million?
2 million? Okay, that's a
2
good
million.
starting point, really.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
and the upper end of the limit,
50 million.
50 million. Okay, it's a pretty good. It's a pretty good range.
Yeah. We can fund portfolios. We can do single assets. So yeah.
I mean, it sounds a lot like quite analogous actually to a lot of the lending that Michael would have been doing at Topland back in the day. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When you're looking at these, I appreciate you'll have had a good amount of experience from your days in Octopus in the commercial team, but when you're looking at this sort of broad cross section of sectors, how do you get comfortable with the security? Because you can't every time you get an inquiry, you can't be like, call me when there's a valuation and I'll tell you what I think of it, right? You're going to have to be able to have a view on something when it first comes in. So how do you develop the knowledge and the skills to have that breadth of experience and understanding to be able to give people a view straight off the bat, rather than having to wait for a formal report that could come 4 to 6 weeks later and is going to cost 10 plus grand to a client to get it done?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a skill. I think one of the things that we're really good at as a business is actually leaning on our network. So between the people that sit within GRE Finance, there's a network of variety of agents, valuers that we can all lean on for some initial advice. We obviously see a lot of deal flow and inquiry flow anyway as a business, and from that we generate kind of a view just based on what we see. But no, it's not easy, and it's not easy, as you say, doing so many different types of things. But we try, and as a business, we always try and have a discussion between us, and quite quickly we'll get, we get to a conclusion. But no, it can be a challenge, but you just have to be quite disciplined with your time, and not talk over and over and over things, to the nth degree, but actually make a quick decision fast. And that's something as a business we really try and kind of stick to, because otherwise, like you say, we could spend hours and hours and hours talking about things that actually we're never going to get comfortable with. But just having the discipline to be like that. It's all about discipline.
Yeah. I mean, how many of you are there out now at GRE?
So there is 6 of us.
6 in total. Okay.
Yeah. So the 2 founders, myself and another person working in Origination, and then we've got 2 people working on kind of operations, execution.
So I mean, having been in that position, way back when, I think the big, as particularly in the early days of Avamore, especially because we were lending our family money, we were lending, and we had co-investors who were also experienced commercial property people as well. We had that sort of flexibility to do anything we wanted to, actually, and then in the end we barely ever did anything that was a bit fruity or interesting. But I think but the number of times in the early days we sort of go down a rabbit hole and talk something over endlessly, and then in the end the answer would all still end up being no. We could never really quite get, or the offer that we made was so ridiculously uncommercial, I think we might have burnt a relationship with the broker. How do you prevent yourself from going down that rabbit hole? How do you who is it that makes the decision, right, okay, we need to stop this discussion, we're not going to get there, let's move on? Who does that? How do you stop yourself from kind of just constantly going down that rabbit hole?
I think the thing that stops us is that we're all quite busy.
Yeah.
So we always have like a natural end to a conversation, because one of us will have a meeting or another person will have a meeting. So that's kind of the reason, that's kind of what stops it. But you're so right. You're so right. One of the other things that I do actually, and I'm quite religious on, is I'm always asking the broker or the borrower what other terms they may have, or who else have they gone to. Obviously, as being the owner of a lending business, the market is so crowded and there are so many players, and actually there'll be some deals that there's no point us even kind of entertaining a conversation on, because they may have got terms from, or getting terms, or it may be a deal where there's loads of other people there to do it, and actually they might be they may be better suited to do it. And actually I think you have to, in the lending business, you have to just in some sense, you have to know your place and know actually where you're going to win, and where actually it's better for you to say, look, not one for us.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important, but that does take discipline.
Yeah.
Particularly when you're in a business that wants to grow, you want to be all things to all people, and actually sometimes you have to go, look, it's not one for us.
Yeah.
People respect you more, I think, as well for that.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we really focus on and we really reflect on is that we'd if we're not sure we can get to yes on a deal, we have any doubts, we'll be like, look, this isn't, we're not sure we're going to get there. So we don't think this is going to be productive to the long-term relationship, particularly with a broker or someone who could be a repeat customer. So we just go, look, I think maybe you should go elsewhere. And I think sometimes you win more by being clear, because I bore people to death with saying this, and I've probably said it on the podcast enough times. We don't sell financial services, we sell trust. Like broker, particularly a business like us, you probably do a little bit more direct with clients, but particularly for us with brokers, people are putting their potentially a 20-year relationship with a client at risk. And if we do them dirty, that broker has potentially lost a long-term revenue stream. So we have to give them that sense of trust that we're going to perform, and then we've got to perform. And if we're not performing, then we're blowing up that trust. So I think where you guys' mindset is spot on. I just want to highlight that actually what I really like that I really like the angle that you're taking as well from a product set perspective, because I think if you're doing things like open storage, that's becoming an increasingly interesting space from an investment perspective. Some of the rents on open storage now are getting quite, because shed rents are really high. But I think 99% of the specialist finance markets can be like, no, well, a funding line doesn't allow us to do that, so we can't do it. So I think you've got a really nice, that as one example is a really nice niche that you can operate within. So yeah, I've got a lot of time for that. But what's the weirdest inquiry you've ever had, and how did you, either at GRE or before, and how did you approach that?
I've had quite a few inquiries for cemeteries over the years.
Okay, go on.
I mean, the approach with that is just a quick kill. But I've had quite a few inquiries for cemeteries. I mean, I don't know what you can do with a cemetery. Like, I don't know, but kill those.
Okay.
Other weird things?
And what about fruity or colourful characters that have come to you?
Lots.
Okay,
we get a lot in our space.
What can you say? What can you say?
Oh, gosh. Just people that have a lot of bad press about them. Also, the one thing I think you do realise in this industry is if you have money, people get quite jealous of you, and there's a lot of bad press about people that's probably unwarranted just because they've been very successful.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't like very successful people, and very successful people often attract the opinions, negative opinions, even if they're not warranted. And I think that's one thing that I've learned. Doing this.
Have you been on the receiving end of some criticism or a bit of hate now that you've got a little bit of success, or you've tasted a bit of success, or you've been immune to it, thankfully?
I'm immune to it till now.
Till now, okay.
Yeah, I hope that stays that way.
Okay.
Don't deal well with mean people, so hopefully it stays that way.
Yeah. The DMs are locked, and keep the mentions. Don't look at your mentions. No, that's interesting. The cemetery thing's interesting. Actually, I've completely apropos nothing. I ended up having a dinner with a very long-standing friend of mine. He's a very successful, wealthy. He's a farmer, but he's more than a farmer. And when the subject of cemeteries came up, and actually that there's there's actually a lot of money in cemeteries now, because of course you can sell the plots. You can sell the plots in advance. Yeah. So that's in, but so again, but you can't do everything, right? And that's a difficulty, right? That you experience. Would you look at paddle courts? Would you?
Yes.
Yeah. I had no idea. Like, I mean, I've played paddle. I like it. I'm played proper tennis as well. It's probably more my thing. But I had no idea how much money there is in paddle now. It's insane.
Yeah.
So have you financed any paddles facilities yet?
We haven't financed any paddle courts to date, but there's still time. Maybe 2025 we'll bring some paddle court financing to our desks. But it's just an income stream. The other thing with paddle courts is, I don't know if you've tried to get a space on a court. Really difficult. In London, super difficult to get a space on a court. So yeah.
So I was I had a meeting with a broker. He's a Spanish guy, and his office is based out sort of Leytonstone sort of way. And I was wearing, I think I had my local tennis club gilet on or something like that. As our viewers and listeners know, I love a gilet. And he said, "Oh, you like tennis? Oh, I play paddle." I said, "Okay, cool." He said, I play paddle in this place in Ilford." I was like, "All right, yeah." I said, oh, it's really noisy. He said, yeah, well, they've got 17 paddle courts in this facility in Ilford. It's in a big shed, and it's open until 1 a.m. And you said it's booked all day, right up until 1 a.m. Every single court's booked. It's insane. I don't know if it's like a temporary thing or it's like whether it's going to sort of die off eventually. But the appetite for paddle at the moment is enormous. So yeah, okay, I'm well up for putting some money into a paddle facility myself. So and Claire can provide the financing.
Yeah, we'll provide the financing.
I know you wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that you're quite passionate about, particularly increasing the presence and prevalence of women in finance. Talk to us about that a little bit, like your experiences as a woman in finance, and what do you think we need to do to get more women into the finance space?
So yeah, I'm very passionate about kind of creating more opportunities and more exposure for women within finance and kind of the real estate industry. And I think our roles cross both of those sectors, both of those industries. So keen to mention them together. I think there's not enough women. There's not enough women at the top within kind of the real estate finance space. I mean, when I was kind of younger, I remember looking, at the board of various, leading real estate companies and thinking, where are your women? And I think we need to improve that. I don't know the answer. I don't necessarily have the answer. But I think there definitely needs to be something done. And I think there is a growing network of women within the real estate industry. But I think there definitely needs to be more done. And I think actually across the board, it goes without saying there's other intersections of diversity and inclusivity, whether that be race, disabilities, or whatever it is, that actually we need to improve across the industry. I think there's still, sadly, a lot of the same faces within the industry, and there needs to be more faces, different types of faces.
Yeah, the MIPIM lads hashtag on X and Twitter definitely. Definitely getting a good outing with lots of sort of male, pale, and stale faces. I think it's definitely getting better, but at the same time, when we were having obviously you're in the props committee as well with me, and we were having a discussion about a long list or short list for the Lifetime Achievement Award. Being frank, and bearing in mind that one of the co-chairs is a lady who was basically saying there isn't really anyone that we can choose from. How do we get, you've been attracted to the real estate industry, and it's funny because we've got sitting here, we've got Laura, who's my EA, and we're having this debate yesterday about increasing female representation within Avonmore, and we've kind of got close to 50% when we were a bit smaller, ironically, but it's sort of the actual number of women in the business has been roughly the same throughout. You were attracted into the real estate industry, and real estate finance industry. Can you speak to what attracted you to the industry, and what do you think someone else who maybe is less motivated and committed to go into the real estate industry, what's putting them off? Is it that every on every website it's male, pale, stale faces, or is there something else that we're missing?
I think when I went into the industry, I didn't realize there was necessarily an issue. I don't necessarily think it's getting people into the industry that's necessarily the issue, because I think I've looked at reports and stuff, and actually entry into real estate across the board is actually quite even. And in some areas it's more female, more female heavy. But I think it's that transition through the person's career that becomes kind of, that's when women drop off at various stages. I think there still is a big drinking culture in our industry, and I think that pub culture and beer culture, and I think that can put off some women. In my role, I go out and I meet lots of people and I try and build relationships, and actually a lot of those relationships, they still want to do those deals and build those relationships down the pub, and that can put off a lot of people, and that's scary to a lot of women, and they just don't want to be in those environments. I think that's an issue. But going back to how we tackle it, I think as a woman, and I always say to other women that are kind of in a position of privilege and that they've kind of made something of themselves within the industry, it's on all of us to do more, speak more about it, and bring other women up through the ranks by in any way which is possible. So whether that be referring business or mentioning kind of being part of mentoring schemes, which is something I've done, and I've been a mentor and I've been a mentee. I think they're just all things as individuals that we can all do. I don't know if there's one kind of size fits all and there's one approach that you can take across the industry, but I think just making sure we're all accountable. And if you've made a success of yourself, make a success of others based on your own success.
I mean, have you encountered women in the industry who sort of pull the ladder up behind them and make life more difficult for other women in the industry?
Yeah, I think sometimes we're our own worst enemies.
Okay.
And I think sometimes we are our own worst enemies, and I think sometimes we think, we think that we're competing with ourselves quite a lot, and I think that's not the case. I think if we should there's space for everyone. There's absolutely space for everyone. And I also think we should call people out. And I want to be better at this. We should call companies out for doing things that aren't necessarily correct and aren't necessarily in the spirit of actually bringing more diversity and inclusivity into the industry.
Yeah, I think sometimes we have to be careful though not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think we have overall as an industry made great strides. You know, we were reflecting on, you know, the diversity that we have within Avamore. Probably one of the areas that we do need to improve on is female representation. But at the same time, you also, you know, your small businesses or medium-sized businesses, you know, you don't want to pay lip service to it. You know, you want to live that, but you also want to make sure that you have the right culture as an organization, people of the right quality as well. You know, I think hiring people just on the basis of characteristics is probably not. I don't think that helps.
No, absolutely
I don't think it helps in the long run. I think it's a gradual process, and you just have to sort of chip away at it a little bit at a time. I think sometimes people like to make a lot of noise about these things. They like to make noise about DEI. It's amazing the number of organisations that are basically run by white middle class people that make a lot of noise about DEI, but actually they have these great big fancy DEI policies that actually don't do anything about it. Actually, I'd much rather be an organisation that lives it and doesn't need to preach about it.
Yeah.
But you know, that's just us. You know, at the end of the day, like I think the first step is acknowledging that there's that more needs to be done, and then that we go from there. This episode is brought to you by J3 Advisory. J3 understands the unique insurance challenges that lenders face and are committed to providing solutions that offer peace of mind and financial security. Their expert advice helps you make better, faster decisions about your insurance program. Interested in a CPD session to update your teams on the current insurance landscape, or need precise and practical insurance advice for life schemes? Get in touch with J3 Advisory. Learn more at j3advisory.co.uk. J3 Advisory is authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. What does the future look like for you? What would you say success would look like if you look back in 10, 15 years from now? You know, what would you reflect on as being right? Okay, I'm in a good place, and I've achieved something really quite meaningful. Not to demean what you've already achieved so far, but like you've obviously got some more gears to go through, I guess.
Oh, interesting question. I think just working on bigger projects, more projects, you know, working with some, you know, big names. I think I really like doing deals, and I get a real kind of sense of achievement and kind of adrenaline rush from doing deals. So I think just doing more deals, and also bringing others up through the industry. I'd like to see, some of the people that I've managed over the years being successful. That would make me really proud and really happy. And hopefully just growing the GRE business more and more year on year.
I think it's really nice to be talking about the development of other people. I think if I look back at probably the thing that gives me the greatest satisfaction is that is the number of how we continually have a conveyor belt of people within Avamore who come to us as graduates or very early in their career, and they go on to, either within the organisation or outside of the organisation, go on to sort of bigger and better things. Not necessarily bigger and better than what they were doing at Avamore, but I think but it might be. Ultimately, it's about the development of people is for me something that I'm very passionate about. So I love hearing about that. Talk to me about like you love doing deals. We're in that sort of Christmas silly season right now when we're at the time of recording. So presumably you've got a lot of deals that have to complete in the next 4 or 5 days. What's the emotion you experience when you get that email that comes through that's like, oh, they've got a CCJ on their file, or there's a problem with the planning, or there's an issue on the title? What's the feeling? What's the emotion you experience when you see that email or you have that phone call, and how do you respond to it?
If you'd asked me this question probably like 5 years ago, I would have been in a flap. I'd have got very emotional potentially, but now I do feel quite calm.
Okay.
And if you ask people that probably have known me for 5 years, they'd be like, she used to be very chaotic, but now I feel much calmer. I feel like the more you do, the more scenarios you see, and as you probably know, you've seen so many scenarios over the years. Generally, there's not many things where I'm like, there's things where people have wasted your time, and that can just be inordinately frustrating, as you know. But there's not many things that get thrown up in the process now, which I get kind of like emotional in a flap about. I think there's always there's a solution to most things, with, say, for big issues.
How did you develop that sort of that ability to compartmentalize and just sort of stay calm in these situations? Because I mean, being truthfully honest, someone, every time a deal that's close to completion like falls out of bed, I'm like, someone's took the jam out of my donut. I still feel it very personally.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that? How do you compartmentalize that and stay calm?
I think some of it came from my time at Octopus, actually, where when I started managing people, I needed to be a role model to others.
Right.
So actually, you can't be flappy, chaotic. You have to give, even if underneath the surface you are seething, and you're a ball of chaos, you have to exert an element of confidence and authority over a scenario. So I just think I think it's just seeing scenarios over and over again, and seeing a variety of scenarios. And that's why actually I think, go back to what we said earlier, being in a larger organisation at the beginning of your career is invaluable, I think, because you get to kind of see the breadth of what goes on within a business, a lending business, and that gives you a really good foundation for the future.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I can sort of see that, but having worked in a large organisation, I don't think I developed that that sort of unflappability. I think it's like I said, it's taken me a serious amount of time to develop some degree of that, and I still don't think I've completely ironed it out. I guess on the flip side of that, though, is like, how do you, in those situations, how do you not then go too far the other extreme and be like, kind of giving the appearance that you almost don't give a shit, and you're like, whatever, it happens, happens. If it happens, it's great. If it doesn't, because I guess people also will feed off that, and they'll be like, well, if the deal doesn't happen, it doesn't matter. And oh no, the deal died. I still get paid. I can still go home and watch Netflix at the end of the day and pay my mortgage or pay my rent, and everything's good. Doesn't really matter. Like, how do you kind of draw the line? Find the right side of the line.
Interesting question. I definitely always care. So I always care, and every deal that dies or doesn't die, I always care. But I think it's just how you deal with it.
Yeah.
So taking a pragmatic, solution-led approach rather than, there's no solution in being flappy and chaotic. The solution is kind of thinking about it, bringing your team together, understanding what you need to do to get it over the line, speaking to your lawyers, speaking to whoever it is you need to speak to. But no, always showing you care, and always updating people. That's super important. That's a very important way to show the people that you're all over. It's updating people, keeping people updated within the process, whether that be the sponsor or the broker.
How do you approach a difficult conversation with a broker or a sponsor when you have to, the deal's quite advanced and you do have to say no? Like, how do you, presumably you approach each conversation with a bit of trepidation, but like, how do you, what in your experience is the best way to have that conversation? And frankly, when have you had that kind of conversation and it's gone quite badly and you've had to learn from that kind of experience?
I think you just have to be very direct, which is something that I've had to get better at over the years. Be very direct, cut to the point, but also make sure that you explain any situation. I think that's super important. I think sometimes we think other people know what we're thinking. In any scenario, whether that be in work or in your home life. But actually explaining the rationale behind our decision is really important, and why we have come to that decision. And that's really important, so that, as particularly when you're dealing with an intermediary or a broker, so they can relay that to the borrower. I think another thing which I think is really important, which I always often do in scenarios which are a bit dicey, is offering to speak to the borrower directly, fronting it up with a phone call, not sending an email, actually being happy to pick up the phone and say to them, look, this is the scenario, this is where we've got to, having a video call or whatever it is. And I think by being open, transparent and direct, you build a rapport with people, and just really breaking it down. So not assuming that they will understand where you're coming from, really breaking it down. And I think that skill for me has come from managing graduates over the years and having to break things basically down to the most basic level to people that have maybe got 1 or 2 years experience, being able to distill messages down to a very simple message.
Obviously, you're on a bit of a growth tear at the moment at GRE. Property market has been quite interesting, particularly if you've been active in the commercial sector. I've been investing in buying over the last couple of years in the commercial sector. Thankfully got my first PD consent come through, and a bit more hopefully to come in the new year. What are your predictions for 2025? I mean, we had a fairly negative budget from a real estate standpoint, I guess, and a business standpoint. But what are your predictions for 2025? What are the themes that you're expecting to see, and how are you planning to capitalise on them at GRE?
I think what I'm hoping for is for there to be some stability within interest rates, because I think at the moment there's a lot of people that are thinking, there might be some more, downward movement, which will help us. So let's not do that. Let's not kickstart that project. So let's not do that. So I'm hoping for that. I think there will be much more activity next year. I think there has been some confidence instilled in the market, particularly in the latter half. Albeit I appreciate there was a slightly negative budget. I do think from our perspective, we're seeing an uptick in activity, particularly on the acquisitions. So for the last few years, in our space has been, endless refinances, and every inquiry that's through the door is for a refinance. We're seeing many more people that are looking to acquire, and looking to reposition assets, which I think is really, really positive. So we are looking to capitalise it on by way of just kind of writing more business. We've obviously bolstered the team. We've taken on 2 kind of execution operations people to really harness what we're doing there.
Yeah. Where do you see the headcount at GRE by the end of next year? Are you sort of looking to double the size of the team, or are you looking at, or just be a bit more gradual and adding people as and when they're the right fit?
So we've hired a graduate who's going to be joining us in January. I don't think the team will get that much bigger in terms of headcount. We've actually just gone through a process where we've been working with an AI consultant who has basically come into the business and looked at all of our processes across the board and gone, what can we improve there? Where can we make efficiencies there? And actually, the work that he's done has been mind-blowing for us as a business, which will enable us to not necessarily increase our headcount, but the headcount that we've got will be much more efficient. We'll be able to actually really work on things that are value add for us as a business, as opposed to a lot of us spending time doing things that just aren't value add. So we're really looking forward to going into 2025 with with all of those AI implementations.
Right. Yeah. So your GPT-4 subscription is well and truly active, I guess.
Yeah.
Can you give, like, without giving away the secret sauce, the GRE secret sauce, can you give a couple of examples of how you're using AI in the business and taking advantage of that to make yourselves more efficient?
Yeah. So two very simple things. So any inquiry that comes into the business, and as you know, inquiries come through various means, whether it's a phone call, an email. We log all those inquiries because I think it's really useful for our investors. It's really useful for our own internal understanding. The way we log those inquiries was and currently is an Excel spreadsheet, which is keyed in manually by myself or other members of the team. That's going to be basically done via an AI bot.
Okay.
Who'll basically take the information from the email or the phone call and basically put that into a system, which is really useful. And then the other thing is the writing of credit papers. That takes an inordinately long time, and actually the time that's spent doing that could be spent actually really understanding the deal, running the analysis, and really getting underneath the numbers. So they're two of the things that
two of many, I guess.
Two of many.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's the guy that worked with us has been incredible.
Yeah. Well, I mean, those of you who've been watching and viewing will know that we've been on our own tech journey, and we hired 3 tech people within Avonmore. So, and one of the things that we're now, one of the things that we're working on as well is, we're working on a variety of things, but we're effectively trying to create a full end-to-end semi-automated lending platform. We're sort of probably 6 months out of 18 months or 15 months along the journey. So probably 9 to 12 months to go before we're kind of there. But it's fascinating to sort of hear that and see that the power of AI and GPTs, the GPTs, or if you're using Claude or Gemini or whatever, and it's only just getting more powerful. And so the stuff that we were able to do a year ago relative to what it can do now, the processing capability is amazing. I mean, if you've ever shoved a valuation report through ChatGPT, it's really fascinating to see what it takes out of that, for example. And I guess that the thing that always makes me laugh, and obviously I know you like your LinkedIn as well as I do, it's when I see LinkedIn posts which are so obviously created using ChatGPT. I'm sure everyone knows this now, but if there's an emoji at the end of every sentence, it's probably been written by ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And I don't know why they haven't updated the algorithm to be like, stop doing that, because it's so obviously written by AI. But I guess in looking back, I guess, at sort of themes and predictions for the year ahead, you obviously work a lot on repositioning. Some of that will be in the planning sector. Do you have any idea or any sense of where the planning system's going to go, particularly, I guess, more, conversions, office to resi, if it's not PDR, or, land without planning that people want to get consents on? As someone who personally has been on the wrong end of the planning system too many times over the last 4 or 5 years, do you think that's going to get better next year?
I don't think the planning system will necessarily get better. I think that more and more people will just look to reposition existing assets because that is the easiest route in which to do so, rather than going for a brand new consent or something like that. So I think, and that's where we can really capitalize on working with sponsors who want to just reposition existing assets, go through a change of use play, go through non-material amendments or whatever it is within existing consents. But I think the planning system in the UK is broken, sadly, and we kind of all know that. I think it'd be great if there was a magic wand and it was fixed, but my sense is it won't be, and my sense is that actually more and more people who were previously out and out kind of ground up developers are going down the route of existing buildings and capex plays, because that's the easiest and actually the most efficient, quickest way to turn projects around. More, I see, as you probably see, is projects all the time that have just been delayed and delayed and delayed by the planning system in the UK. And I think over time, the people who are our clients, they simply can't operate like that. So they switch their strategy to doing something which is just slightly easier and slightly more conducive to running their business, which they run on a day-to-day basis.
Do you think the government's going to hit their 1.5 million houses during the life of this parliament target?
No.
Go on.
I think a lot of schemes, so we see a lot of schemes which are in the pre-planning or going through a planning process, and the margin for error on a lot of those schemes in terms of just the appraisal, there's very little margin for error, and what that means is that schemes are just becoming more and more unviable to deliver, and therefore, it's not the government that necessarily builds these houses. Obviously, councils do build housing stock, but it's developers, it's SME developers, it's developers that are building 10 houses at a time or 20 houses at a time. They're the people that will actually, in totality, deliver the housing stock which is required. And I just don't believe that there is the infrastructure, there to do so, despite all the great lenders that there are in the space and everyone that's wanting to do the right thing. I think it's still really difficult out there to actually deliver a scheme from start to finish.
I think the one thing there's probably not a shortage of is the capital to build those houses.
100%.
I think the from what I understand, when you talk about the infrastructure, I guess you're talking about enough planners, enough people in the planning departments who can actually focus on the actual consents that are required, number one. And I guess the second part is who's going to build all these houses. I mean, did you hear Angela Rayner being interviewed? I think she was on Sky News, I think, and she said and she was quizzed on who's going to go and build the houses. And then she said, well, we'll go and we'll bring them in from abroad. And then the interviewer said, well, where are they going to live? And then she says, oh, we've got enough housing.
Yeah, I mean,
it was such a car crash.
Yeah, so when I talk about infrastructure, there's absolutely capital, private capital, banks, and lots of lenders out there that, like yourselves, are very willing and keen to support developers of all shapes and sizes. But it's the broader infrastructure, the macroeconomic infrastructure, which I think struggles.
Are there any commercial sectors that we need to avoid? Like of all the commercial sectors that you're active in, what are the ones you think are really attractive to lend towards or invest in, and what are you being told by clients you need to avoid that with a 10-foot barge pole?
I think open storage I've alluded to.
Yeah.
We are quite bullish also on the office sector. I think there's a real opportunity within the office sector.
Okay.
Reason for that being more and more companies are going back full time, or at least four days a week to the office. I think there's been a real push since COVID to make offices more experience led. Prior to COVID, there was an element of that, but I think that's really been pushed forward now. So I think there's a real opportunity next year within the office sector and the storage sector. Things I would avoid, I think PBSA is potentially having stock that is existing. I think maybe having some issues. The reason I say that is because more and more I'm hearing that kind of PBSA, which is where the rents are quite high within a location, it's just becoming unaffordable to the domestic market. And I think we need to watch out for that. I think there's actually a real opportunity within student accommodation to target kind of the domestic market. And I think often the domestic market is forgotten because people are chasing, they're chasing super high rents, super high spec.
Yeah.
But actually there's a real opportunity to provide good quality, affordable, and I mean affordable for the domestic market. So that's one of the things.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting you talk about PBSA in that context. When I'm hearing that a room in a new PBSA unit in Glasgow is going for £295 a week, and my head's good. I mean, there's a sort of quite nice story on the Avonmore side that we've now done repeat deals with my uni landlord when I was in Bristol. So I won't mention him by name, but he owns a chain of a chain of convenience stores, basically. And then he's built up over the last 20 plus years. You can tell how long ago it was I was at uni there. He's built up quite the portfolio, especially now looking at his A&L. And he's got to the point now where he's even doing ground up new builds and sort of heavy refurb conversion type things. So now we've done multiple deals with him, including on that side. So, but I contrast the 75 quid a week that I was paying, and I know, we're going back into ancient history now, but contrast that now with the rents that people are paying, and I guess these are international students, but if you compare that with if you wanted to rent a room, in an HMO in Glasgow, you're not going to be paying £1,400 a month to rent a room in an HMO in Glasgow. So it is. I can understand where you're coming from. It's very, very much divorced from reality. You talk about the office sector. As someone who is an office expert, I say I'm an expert. I mean, that's probably bollocks. I've been involved in the office sector for a long time in my career. For better or for worse. Do you think there's a risk of it sort of being that there'll be a real feast of famine? So kind of a bit binary, if you've got the best product in the best location, it's going to be successful. The stuff that's a bit secondary, and I say that as someone who owns 2 secondary office buildings in Surrey, do you think the people who've got the secondary stock are going to be suffering, or do you actually think that sort of this is a rising tide that will lift all boats?
I think it's the latter, and I think as long as what is on offer is suitable for said location, I think there's an opportunity for kind of really high end stock, and also the stuff that is just affordable for people who are operating within that location. So recently I actually went out to a co-working space similar to type of environment we're in today, in North London, and the types of businesses in there were kind of local, businesses where there was 3 or 4 employees, founder-led, organisations, and it was booming. Occupancy was 100%. Waiting list for office space in that place was 18 months. For any type of space, and I think there's a real opportunity as long as it suits, very much micro-location led, as long as it suits the location, is affordable for those that are looking to operate within that location. I think there's a real kind of there remains a real opportunity. There are obviously some white elephants out there, and there obviously are some, particularly office parks. I think there's some office parks across the UK which have probably had their heyday, and over time, as occupiers vacate, they'll probably all move, I imagine, to residential led schemes, or an element of mixed use with a heavy sway towards a residential play. But I think as long as it's very micro location led.
I think the co-working thing, the co-working or sort of small suites strategy, I think makes sense for me, and I think that it makes sense to me, and I think that with at least one of the buildings or the investments that we've got as a family, I think that's the direction we're probably going to head in. I think one of the challenges, when you're trying to market 2 or 4,000 square foot suites in a suburban location for a 3 or 5 year lease, the number of requirements that are out there for that are quite low. Whereas I think the direction I want to go in is rent 2 desks at a time, 4 desks at a time, 8 desks at a time on a flexible basis. So you get the building filled up quicker, and then when tenants start to go, you're less exposed. Well, I think also that a lot of occupiers are less inclined to commit to longer term leases in offices, unless you are kind of that best. This is just my personal opinion. Unless you are like that best in class product. But yeah, I guess that time will tell. When someone comes to you with, say, a retail proposition or an industrial proposition or a hotel, what are your views on that right now? Like, where's your appetite sitting for those kind of assets?
So hotels, we really like hotels. Again, micro location led. So is there demand within that location? Earlier in the year, actually, we closed on a hotel deal just outside of London. It was a refurbishment of the rooms to basically bring it up to kind of what's required today, and then moving it to kind of longer term finance once they've stabilised. So we really like hotels. There are real kind of cost issues within a lot of those operational sectors at the moment, as we alluded to earlier. Staff costs are increasing, so we just have to be cognizant of that within the hotel sector. Retail we like as well.
Okay.
But retail, it feels like a lot of the banks are going back into that sector quite heavy.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So
why is that?
I think I think they've probably realised that there's no further way to go in terms of values within that sector. So probably the only way is up.
But we're talking retail warehouse, we're talking about high street, shopping centres, like where, I mean, like, because we've seen like shopping centres trade in, I don't mean to pick on Scotland, but like there was a shopping centre that was bought for 40 million quid and then was sold for like £750,000, like 5 years later.
Yeah.
I think it was like Strathclyde or something like that. Do you have to be very selective still?
Yeah, I think you still have to be very selective. And I think shopping centres are one. I think that shopping centres, for example, you have to be just really understanding of the operational requirements of running that shopping centre. And I think that's where a lot of lenders have kind of tried to steer clear away from that. Even if they're happy with the values, actually they want to steer clear, because I personally don't want to have to operate a shopping centre, because it's just very OPEX heavy.
Yeah, very.
It's not an office on a single lease where you just have an income stream. You've got all these different tenants to manage. You've got service charges to manage. You've got all sorts to manage. But yeah, I think a lot of people have seen that actually there's not much left to go within retail. Yeah,
I mean, from an occupier perspective, like, occupancy, it probably can't get much worse, because I think that the internet has probably eaten all of the marginal operators within that space, and now it's just it's probably now going to settle from and let's be honest, like restaurants as well, there's only so much further Uber Eats Uber Eats and Just Eat can take you out of sort of nick your chips. What about the resi space? Like, what about the resi market? Like, what's going to happen to people's house prices next year? What's your in-house view?
So they say that house prices are going to on the up.
Okay.
I think there needs to be within London, I'm talking about, I think there needs to be some kind of government intervention to one, encourage more properties to be built, and two, to make it affordable again. So I was the benefit when I bought my apartment a few years ago of London Help to Buy, really low interest rates. London Help to Buy now doesn't exist, and there are other schemes that are kind of trying to replace that.
Yeah.
But I think without the Help to Buy scheme, which I appreciate it's probably propped up values within particularly the new build space, I think London will start to become, really unaffordable. It's always been unaffordable. I think it's become really unaffordable. Yeah. We look at a lot of schemes which are kind of 14 flats or 20 flats, and I don't know who's buying that stuff at the moment.
Yeah, you mean end units?
Yeah, I think the occupational story is really strong, and I think you hear stories. I don't rent anymore, obviously, but you hear stories of people not being able to rent properties, and properties being up for rent for an hour and then being snapped on kind of 2-year deals.
20 people queuing to go and view a viewing.
Yeah,
right?
And you hear that over and over again. So I think the occupational story is really strong, but I'm not sure who is buying kind of new build stock anymore. But then I also I go in two phases where I think actually house purchases are still very much an emotive thing, and people will put all they can at something to secure the property they want to buy. So I think I go between two kind of areas, schools of thought often.
Yeah, I think there's you get a lot of commentators that sort of go very doom and gloom. There's that guy on Twitter called Moving Home with Charlie, who, by the way, call me. We want to get you on the podcast. It's going to be a fun chat. But you got someone like that who's sort of talks very very doom and gloom, and you see other people also talking down the housing market. Lots of chat about there's so many nearly complete blocks or completed blocks that are basically being sold by receivers, and obviously we've got likes of Jonathan van der Molen and Watling, and lots of people as well, and these blocks are being sold for big discounts. You go, oh my god, this housing market's is the housing market on the downturn, potential unemployment going up, obviously the budget not helping that, and then I see. Obviously completely anecdotal. I bumped into my friend Sean yesterday. I've known him for a long time, and he just bought his flat with his wife last week, and he's delighted. Young couple bought a flat in a Victorian Terrace, and I'm like, well, there are people buying.
Yeah.
You know, there are people, regular people are buying properties, and the housing market is not dead. So I'm kind of cautiously optimistic on the housing market. I'm not kind of all in with my chips, but definitely feeling like, look, there is a good story.
Yeah.
Like as someone who is probably going to build out, 14 flats in Staines at the end of next year. I know that there is going to be a significant lack of stock in that market, and more broadly within not just the southeast, but most of the country. And that there is an opportunity. I think it's just, we have to maybe let some of the negative press wash itself through, and I think things will start to pick up. But I also hear what you're saying as well about that. They need the affordability is going to, on the buying side, the affordability is maybe improved slightly, but it's about to get out of reach again very quickly if we're not careful. Yeah,
and I go back to if the real estate fundamentals are strong, there's a strong location, there's strong connectivity, there's a strong employment hub, and I'm not just talking about London. I'm talking across the UK. I think there's always opportunity. Yeah, and I think, as I mentioned, the occupational market, renting is if you're the lender, the occupational story is always strong.
In terms of like work-life balance, you're obviously very successful, in your own right, and you've come a long way. What's giving you the drive and motivation? Is that something that's intrinsic, or are there any particular things that happen in your life that have really given you that oomph, that desire to get forward in your career?
I think I've never been the cleverest person. I'm not like the most book smart person. People talk about book smartness, but I'm not the most book smart person. But I think I've always tried really hard, and I think I've always wanted to try hard, and I've always wanted to do better, and I think that has always driven me and motivated me. And I just always want to do better. I think nothing's ever good enough for me. And that sounds very pessimistic, but I always want to drive forward and just do more.
And have you always been like that, or is that something that's come a bit recently?
I've probably always been a bit like that.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm a bit of a workaholic, and I'm not afraid to admit that at all. I'm a bit of a workaholic, and I kind of love work.
we talk about work-life balance actually in the office, and what do you say to people who don't feel like they've got the right level of work-life balance? I mean, my view is you either work to live or you live to work. It sounds like you're one of those live to work people, or do you think people can go from one to the other?
I think people can go from one to the other. I think what's also important that actually there will be times I used to say this to the kind of the grads and stuff I manage, there'll be times in your life where you'll have work-life balance, but there'll also be periods of your life where there's no work-life balance at all, or where it's all life and there's no work, and vice versa, and that's okay. I think some people want to have this consistent work-life balance, and I think that's, to be successful, I think that's really difficult. But actually, if you've worked really hard for 6 months, it's okay to have a month where, you're leaving the office at a reasonable time, you're getting home, you're getting to the gym, and you're doing something, that you want to do of an evening. But I think too many people want this consistent work-life balance throughout the whole year. And I just don't think, particularly in a market which is so cyclical like real estate is, I just don't think that's necessarily the way to go.
No. But speaking to that, I mean, presumably you do have some sort of life outside of work. I mean, are there any things that you like to do, anything you like to do to sort of, in your spare time, any hobbies or any things that, obviously when work allows, because obviously we already know now, Claire, that's, that comes first for you, and it does for me as well, I guess.
I've got a David Lloyd membership.
Okay.
I do like going to David Lloyd. So I've got one of their all clubs memberships. Okay. So I go to different David Lloyds.
What's your favourite one?
What's my favourite one? Northwood in
Northwood. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Great spa facilities.
Is it? Okay. Yeah. What's the worst one?
Oh, the worst one. The one in Reading's quite bad.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. The one in.
It's just a bit old and is a bit tatty, is it?
Yeah. Not great.
Yeah.
But there is a tiering system. There actually a tiering system.
Okay.
The super clubs all the way down to the tier 6 or 7s.
Yeah. So what is it? And what's the thing you judge it by? Is it judging it by the quality of the spa facilities, or is it a bit more holistic?
Very holistic.
Okay.
But the guys in the office find it hilarious. So every Monday morning, they'll never fail to ask me, so which one did you go to this weekend? And I'll give them a little anecdote of my little review. It's a TripAdvisor review of the weekend's David Lloyd visit.
Okay, and on that note, have you ever been asked to finance a David Lloyd investment yet?
No.
No.
But I have, one of my old mentors actually managed the David Lloyd ground rent portfolio.
Okay.
That was interesting.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
So if you got an inquiry for David Lloyd facility, would you go and do a site visit?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I probably would have already done the site visit prior to getting the inquiry.
What if it's in like Carlisle?
Okay, no.
No.
I've not been to all of them, but I've been to a lot of them.
Okay. Thoughts on David Lloyd Royal Berkshire?
That's a good one.
It is, yeah.
Although other ones are coming up now.
Okay.
Yeah, that used to be a really good one.
And now, okay. So what's the one we need? I can't believe having this conversation, but it's quite funny. What's the David Lloyd we need to look out for?
Northwood or Rains Park.
Rains Park. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you heard it here first. And then just in terms of like as we're starting to wind down now, closing tradition, we like to, ask you to cast your mind back to what your younger self, maybe when you were, school year at uni. What advice would you give to your younger self, and why, knowing what you do now?
I would say network, because you never know who is going to be in your network that is going to, be useful and helpful to you.
Yeah.
And the other thing is always do the right thing, even when no one's watching.
I like that.
Yeah.
I really like that.
Yeah.
I think so much of a lot of what people do is performative.
Yeah.
And like we would talk about LinkedIn, but there's that kind of look at me, at me, and it's that sort of, is that really you, or is that just you on social media?
Yeah.
And for me, it's I still struggle with authenticity, right?
Yeah.
And I think that maxim that you say, do it even when no one's do it even though no one's watching.
Yeah.
Love that. Absolutely love that.
I do have a final one actually.
Go on.
I think just never be afraid to admit where you just don't know something.
Yeah.
I think too often people try and pretend that they know everything, or pretend that, but actually it's much better to just go, look, sorry, I don't know. Tell me about that, or ask more questions. And people respect you, and you can build rapport much quicker with people when you tell them what you don't know, rather than pretending that you know literally everything.
I love that.
No one knows everything.
I love that. I definitely have been times in my life where I've tried to blag it and I've been found out horribly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Whereas I think that there is, I agree with you. When you say you don't know something, or or you sort of say to someone, I don't quite get this, can you explain it to me, like I'm a 10-year-old? People love to feel important, and giving someone a platform to sort of explain something to you with a degree of authority. I think sometimes people don't realize how actually that's a real strength, to be able to invite someone to do that, rather than if you just go there and give off the impression like you understand when you haven't got the foggiest. It's like, no, I love that. Claire, I think a lot of people have been really inspired by the things you have to say. They'll be really curious about GRE Finance. Maybe they've got some interesting projects that they'd like to get financed by you. If you want people to reach out, how can they get in touch with you, and what's the best way that they can contact you?
Yeah, so always really keen to speak to people about, financing their projects, and also just speak to people more generally. So feel free to reach out via LinkedIn, via our website, grefinance.com, where you'll find my contact details, and you can reach out that way.
Claire, it's been an absolute pleasure having you come on. Thanks very much for sharing the last hour and a half or so with us. You're also a member of the props committee, so I thought it'd be wrong of me not to give the Props Luncheon Awards a bit of a plug. The 2025 Props Luncheon Awards, which is in aid of Variety, the children's charity, is on the 15th of May 2025. Get in touch at variety.org.uk, or you can otherwise get in touch with me directly or Claire directly. And if you want to either provide a sponsorship or buy table tickets, we'd be delighted to take your money and welcome you to the real estate industry's finest lunch event and awards. Otherwise, that's pretty much all I've got to say for today. It's been, as I said, been a delight to spend the last hour and a half with Claire. You can find me on the internet at property_funder. We've also got a Property Funder podcast channel on Spotify, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, where the numbers are doing great guns. And if you're not already subscribed, please subscribe. We're also on TikTok now as well. So we're down with the kids, Instagram, and pretty much all other major social media. And all that leaves me to say is thank you very much, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.